All right, so you trim your pots after the day after you throw them. And if you throw on a Friday, you're gonna have to wrap it in a plastic bag so it doesn't dry out too much in the wet closet. You want them to be kind of leather hard and a little bit more soft than hard because you want to be able to carve easily. If you did cut this off, but sometimes it sticks to that bat, so if you need to do one more wire cut, just make sure your fingers are flat to the bat. And sometimes, especially if it's been in there a little too long, it does get a little stuck. So you should be able to just take it off like that. Now, one thing that I do is when I trim, I don't have a bat on this. We don't need, even if you have bat pins, you want to use the circles right here to be able to kind of line it up. So when I flip it over, actually before I set it down, I kind of want to feel for how thick that bottom is. So I'm feeling the inside, feeling the outside, and kind of thinking, is that really thin? Because that's going to kind of dictate how deep I carve into this. And if it's really thick, you can eliminate some of the weight on your pot by carving a little bit more. Mine's a little bit on the thin side, so I'm not gonna go too deep on this. Now I'm gonna look at the circles to kind of see about where center is, but the reality of your first pots are that they're probably not super centered. They might be a little bit crooked. And when you center it, you wanna center it from the top circle, not the bottom circle. So what I do is I put my hand on the side, just like a record needle, like it doesn't move. And then I lightly kick it, and I want it to kind of brush that and not bounce too much, and that's pretty center. Let me show you what it looks like when it's not center. When it's not center and I kick it, it goes on my finger and then off my finger, like that. So you want to make sure it's as centered as possible. When I get set up for this, I do get a bucket of water and a sponge. I get a little piece of clay just from these bags over there. And I get some loop tools, especially that large loop tool. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just break this into 3 chunks. Some people use spheres to do this, but I kind of like to do like a little bit of a baby carrot because it helps keep it down. So I just kind of press here. If your bowl is really wet, you want to be kind of gentle when you do this because it might push in on the form. And it's not a perfect system. This could still pop off. So sometimes when I trim, I take my left hand and I just go like this as I trim, because then if it does want to come off of there, or if I dig a little too deep and it catches, then my left hand is there to catch it so it doesn't fly off. I like to use the large loop tool quite a bit for this. I'm working at 3 o'clock, just like when you throw and you pull up, it's always at 3 o'clock. And my first carve is always gonna take just that sharp edge off right here. So I'm kicking really gentle. I'm not using an electric wheel because sometimes that gets a little too fast. And I want a little bit more control over my carving. I wanna get that sharp edge off, but I also wanna take off any weight that I don't really need. So I'm gonna actually carve quite a bit of this. If your sides are really lumpy, you can also kind of smooth them out and carve even lower if you want to. Now, me carving here has kind of made it bump up here, so I'm just gonna level off that foot there. So I'm just getting it nice and even, like that. Now, if you remember how your foot looked on your slump mold bowl, remember there was like a ring around it with a indent? That's sort of how ours is gonna look. So this is kind of what you're going for, is a ring around with a little bit of an indent. If you don't carve a foot, I added this extra, that's not part of carving. If you don't carve a foot, you will get points taken off, so make sure you have at least a little bit. Now this is probably the toughest part, and the part that you really want it center the most, because we're gonna actually draw a circle inside of our foot. For this, I use like the sharper end of the large loop tool where it has a bit of a tighter curve. I'm bracing my hand against here to give me a lot of stability. I'm leaving about 1/4 of an inch for a foot, and then I'm just carving a circle. And if your circle is really off, then it means your thing is not centered. So there's my circle. I don't know if these guys can see it. And then I want to carve everything inside the circle. So I'm gonna go a little bit at a time, nice and slow. If your clay's really soft, sometimes that can be difficult because it kind of pills up, and if your clay's too hard, that can be a little tricky. So it really does need to be a good consistency. I don't want to go too deep because I know my pot is not the thickest. If your pot is really thin and you don't think you can carve anything out, then you need to build a foot on, just like we did with our slump mold bowl with a coil, and you're just slipping and scoring a coil on. That's not ideal though. I'm just trying to get this nice and even, nice and smooth, like that. Now I'm gonna show you a fancy way to make a foot a part of the design, but this part is optional. Okay, so this would be good. If you had a foot like that, you're done, write your name on it with your hour, and then it goes in the kiln room. A fancy foot is more like a sake bowl would have, or a ramen bowl, and you can see it from the outside. So what I would do if I wanted this is I would take my tool and I would carve a little bit more so that you have like an actual kind of a flat surface there. And then I can take my tool and take this edge off and make it kind of disappear into the form. I like to do this because it helps me glaze, because I know that I don't want glaze of like 1/4 of an inch from the bottom anyways, and so it looks really purposeful to not have that glazed right there, and then it helps me not have a lot of dripping. My last step, I like to take just a damp sponge and smooth everything down. Make sure it looks really nice, and then I'm writing my name into that. I can put all of this clay just in recycled, and then sometimes I just do a quick wipe down of the edge in case it got a little bit weird when you trimmed, and then it's going in the kiln room to get fired. Sound good? All right, some of you are doing that today, some of you are throwing a bowl, but use your time well and I'll be around.